they're back. I'm just gonna adjust. I will adjust. Hold on. That's not what I meant to click. I need to adjust the sound. There we go. Right. So we're gonna continue Hijikata's route. Alright. I'm just checking things to be sure. Alright, we're fine now. We're fine. Oh, we're still in chapter 1! I didn't realize that. Oh, okay. We gotta play some catch-up. Or catch-up. I don't know. Alright. Even after the events of that night, Hijikata pushed himself just as hard as before. The sun is in my eyes! I'm moving away. He visited the shogun and officials whenever he could find the time. Eventually, his work began to pay off, and they were given one of the Haramoto mansions to use as their headquarters. Between his demanding schedule and fury-related difficulties, I knew he had to be in miserable condition. But he was determined to give Kondo-san his war. Those are words. This alone seemed to sustain him and drive him forward. Perhaps the gods took pity on him. Possibly? Okay, I gotta adjust things again. I'm sorry. Let's see that.
さて、我々の今後の行動についてだが、まずは甲府へ向かい、そこで新政府軍を迎え撃つこととなった。ご公儀からはすでに大砲2門、銃器、そして軍用金を頂戴している。ぜひとも手柄を立てねばな。
2 cannons? Oh boy. Kondo-san was promoted to Executive Lieutenant Minister and Hijikata to Vice Minister prior to their mission. Vice Minister, an executive position within a feudal holding, considered just below a daimyo, that manages the distribution of rice and salaries amongst the serfdom. I can read. It was a momentous honor, although some of the other men were hesitant to find cause for celebration.
なあ、近藤さん。その甲府を守るって話を持ってきたのはどこの誰だ？
勝阿波の神殿だが、それがどうかしたのか？
大の戦嫌いで有名らしいな。そんな人がなんで俺たちに大砲やら軍資金を気前よく出してくれるんだ？
そもそも徳川の殿様自体が新政府軍に従う気満々らしいしな。かつなんとかさんも同じ意向なんじゃねえのか。
Kondo-san frowned. He crossed his arms, bent his chest, and spoke up.
長倉君、原田君、これは幕府直々の命令なんだぞ。確かに戦況が芳しくないため、今は慶喜公も恭順なさっているが、もし我々が甲府城を守りきれば、幕府側に勝算ありと見て、戦に本腰を入れてくださるかもしれん。 それに勝てる勝てないの問題ではない。お上が我々を甲府を守るに足る部隊だと認めてくれているんだぞ。ならば全力で応えるのが武士の本懐というものだろう。そうじゃないかね、長倉君。
その言い方やめてくれねえか。俺は新選組幹部ではあるが、あんたの家来になったつもりはねえんだからな。
Kondo-san looked upset, but Harada spoke up before he could say anything.
斉藤、お前はどう思ってるんだ。
俺は局長と副長の意見に従う。
Which is always Saito's response. All eyes turned to Hijikata-san, who was observing the amicable commotion before him quietly.
とりあえず新政府軍との戦いに備えて大使を増やす。甲府城を抑えたら幕府からも増援が来るはずだ。それに勝阿波守殿の意向についてだが、いくら戦嫌いとはいえ避けられねえ局面があるってことぐらいは分かってるはずだぜ。なんせこの戦で幕府が負けちまえば幕臣は全員食いぶちをなくしちまうんだからな。俺たちを任しゃしねえだろ。
ま、確かにそれも一理あるけどよ。
When Hijikata-san put it that way, it seemed like Zengakura had nothing more to oppose.
では我々は甲府の山に先回りし、野襲の準備をしておいた方が良さそうですね。
今回は羅刹隊は出動させねえ。ここで待機してた。
それはなぜです。
幕府からの増援が来た時、あんたらの姿を見られるのはまずい。甲府城には他の藩のやつらも多く詰めてるから、存在を公にしちまった隠密部隊の意味がねえだ。
ですが
まだ戦は始まったばっかりなんだし、こう焦る必要はねえって三男さん。
I saw Hijikata-san and Heisuke exchange a quick look. They must have realized how Sanan-san would react and talked it over beforehand. To me, at least, there seemed to be silent agreement.
よし、それでは解散。出立までは間があるから各自体調を整えておいてくれ。
That was that. The captains left for their station, seeking to brief their subordinates and prepare for battle. Only Hijikata-san remained behind to begin sifting through the massive stacks of papers and maps. I timidly approached him. Hijikata-san, are you sure it'll be okay?
何が？
This war, it's going to be difficult, isn't it? Wouldn't it have been better to take the Fury Corps along? Bleh.
ああ、それか。
He sighed and set down the map he'd been studying.
前に千姫とかいう女が忠告に来ただ。羅刹隊が辻切りをしてやがる。
Mm.
俺も正直言って三男さんの仕業じゃねえかと思う。
What?
今んとこ羅刹隊は貴重な戦力だ。血を得るために江戸の人間を切って回るなんて許すわけにはいかねえ。それに鳥羽伏見の時は敵方が銀の銃弾を使ってやがったそうで、羅刹隊が役立たずになっちまったから。切り抜ける方法が見つかるまで三男さんは留守番してくる。平助はその見張りだな。あとは再起のための武器調達もしてもらわなきゃならない。
Counterattack? Does that mean he was even planning for a possible loss at Kofu?
多分次も苦しい戦いになる。本当ならお前を連れて行くわけにはいかないんだが、ここに残しておけばまたあの風間とかいう野郎が乗り込んでくるだろうし。 お前も連れて行くが、くれぐれも危険な真似はするんじゃねえぞ。必ず俺の指示に従え。
Hi. I could feel a nervous knot forming in my stomach, but Hijikata-san had to have a far greater case of nerves than I did. I must work hard not to get in anyone's way. It was morning on the day we left for Kofu. Everyone's up already. Huh? The common room was full of men dressed in clothing I'd never seen before.
あれ、千鶴ちゃん、ずいぶん早いんだな。
Your clothes. Are you really Nagakura? What are you wearing?
副長の指示だ。今日から戦の時は様相にすべしとな。
敵は全員様相だからな。勝つためにはこっちの方が都合が良さそうだ。
Really? Hijikata-san was dressed predominantly in black, and his outfit gave him an elegant look. It suited him well. He looked as handsome as an actor. Which is true of the actual Hijikata. That is literally the compliment everybody says about him. To his face, and he knows it. I couldn't help but admire him for a moment.
どうした？俺の着方にどこかおかしなところでもあるか？
No. No, definitely not.
おかしなやつだな。
Wait, Kondo-san's not wearing Western clothes.
おお、異国の服は窮屈そうでな。あの靴というのも歩きにくくて仕方ない。
Changing from geta to shoes has to be complicated.
それに、やはり武士というのは袴に刀を刺していないと締まらん気がしてな。
Oh my god, Kondo-san.
あんたはそのままでいいんだ。前線に出るわけじゃねえし、陣中にどっしり構えててくれりゃいい。あんたの存在自体が大使にとって支えになるんだ。
そうか？そこまで言われると照れてしまう。
Oh my god! Wait! I don't think I've ever seen that sprite combination before. What? I don't think I've ever seen that sprite.
それでは出かけるぞ。甲府城にいざ。
I thank God there wasn't a sound effect there. And thus, the Shinsengumi assumed the name Kyoyo Regulatory Company, and we headed for Kofu by the way of Hachioji. On the way, Kondo-san split from the main group to visit his hometown. Did we get this scene again?
近藤さんはどうしてるんだ？見当たらねえが。
局長でしたらまだ本隊と合流できていないようですが。
まだ追いついてこねえのか？いつまで宿で酒盛りしてるつもりだよ。
まあ、久々の故郷だしな。偉くなった姿を見せて回りてえんじゃねえの？久しぶりに嫁さんと娘にも会いてえだろうし。
Harada has a point.
これから戦なんだぜ。そんなことしてる場合じゃねえだろ。
八王子に入隊希望者が何人かいるらしいんだ。その見分もしなきゃいけねえからな。新入りの大使と打ち解け合うには酒酌み交わすのが一番だろう。
まあ、そりゃそうだけどさ。
Hijikata-san's eyes narrowed, and Nagakura looked unsatisfied as Hijikata-san muttered to himself.
金ばらまいて で接待しなくても大使が集まってくるんだろう。近藤さんにあんな真似させなくても済むんだからな。
Ishikata-san's words cut like a knife. The Shinsengumi had made a name for themselves in Kyoto, true, but the shogunate was faced with a numerically superior force. We no longer had the luxury of interviewing potential recruits and taking the best ones. Now, we had to offer money and alcohol to attract them. Hijikata-san would have rather cut off his own arm than stoop that low, but he had no choice.
副長、お知らせしたいことが。
なんだ、どうかしたか。
どうやら甲府城にはすでに敵が入っているようです。
なんだと。伝令だ。すぐに近藤さんを呼んできてくれ。はい。
Go, Soma, run! It was some time before Kondo-san received the message and returned to the main body of soldiers. That was long enough for news of the castle's fall to spread along the ranks, and many panicked. Nearly 300 of the men we'd left Edo with deserted, reducing our forces to a mere 100 soldiers. Nagakoya and Harada seemed more cautious, and they both advised retreat. But Kondo-san decided that we would form up for battle and fight until the bitter end. Now that we had accepted weapons and money from the shogunate, he said that there could be no retreat. Jesus.
とりあえず俺は江戸に駐屯している増援部隊を呼んでくる。ここで負け戦をするわけにはいかねえ。大使にはこの後援軍が到着すると伝えておいてくれ。これ以上脱走されちゃかなわねえ。
キュイ。
Saito nodded, then turned and jogged off towards the rest of the soldiers. After giving his directions to the last of his men, Hijikata-san finally turned to look at me.
お前は誰かと一緒に江戸まで撃ちろ。ここの戦い、少しでも安全な場所に逃げるに越したことはね。
I decided to... I think the correct answer is stay behind? Yes, it is. I'll stay here. I can't run away from somewhere safe while everyone else is fighting off. I can't run away to somewhere safe while everyone else is off fighting. I'll stay here to protect Kondo-san until you get back. Hijikata-san frowned.
どうやって守るつもりだ。お前ごときの手じゃ何の戦力にもならねえじゃん。
That was a yawn. That was what I expected him to say, but I wasn't going to back down so easily. It's true that I'm not good with a sword, but I can still be his shield. Any small wounds I sustain will heal quickly enough.
なんでそこまで必死になる。そんな命令下しちゃいねえじゃねえか。
Well, I know I'm probably out of line when I say this, but I also know that we can't lose Kondo-san. Not now. I'm sick and tired of always being protected. I want to help. Please. I'd been with them long enough to know how much Kondo-san meant to Hijikata-san and all of the Shinsengumi. If I went back to Edo and Kondo-san died... Just thinking about that... No. I refuse to be the only person to escape unscathed this time. Hijikata-san chewed his lip thoughtfully for a moment, and his hard, piercing gaze never seemed to drift away from my face. Hijikata-san refused to break his concentration, and after a long moment, he sighed.
そこまで言うんなら、新選組大使の一員としてな。
What? My eyebrows shut up.
お前に近藤さんの護衛役を命じる。常に局長に付き従い、その役に立て。
Yes, sir! Without even thinking, I straightened up and began to nod vigorously. I, Chizuru Yukimura, will protect my... bleh, if I can speak. I, Chizuru Yukimura, will protect my chief, even if it means my life. Before I could finish, Hijikata-san cut me off with a sharp expression.
ただし条件が
Fuck!
絶対に死ぬな
What? That wasn't the sort of thing I expected to hear from a man like Hijikata-san. Be careful, maybe, but not you can't die.
盾になろうなんてバカなことは考えなくていい死ねなんて命じる気はね
He gave me one last pointed look and then turned to look towards Kofu Castle bitterly in the distance.
今回の敵が新政府軍に尻尾を振った寄せ集めの連中なら俺たちでもなんとか戦えるかもしれない薩長の奴ら相手じゃどうやったって勝てねえなるべく早く戻るつもりだが俺が帰ってくる前に何かあったらサイトと一緒に近藤さんに話すもちろんお前が盾になる必要はない一緒に逃げろ絶対に死ぬんじゃねえぞ
I felt a cold sweat break out on my back as Hijikata-san's words sunk in. I'd seen others fight for their lives in battle many times, but this is the first time I'd personally joined in battle. Would I really be able to protect Kondo-san? Would it even be possible to evade our enemies, let Kondo-san escape, and survive? Perhaps Hijikata-san noticed my sudden fear because he gave a short, bitter laugh.
その小太刀を少し抜いて持て
Eh? Eh? I fumbled with it for a moment, surprised at the strangeness of his request, and finally pulled my sword from its scabbard. Then Hijikata pulled out his own sword in a smooth motion. Then he took his... Oh, God! Izumi no Kami. Okay, that was easy. Izumi no Kami Kanesada. And tapped his blade against my own. Izumi no Kami... Yeah, Izumi no Kami Kanesada. A legendary blade wielded by Toshizo Hijikata, forged by an 11th generation member of the Kanesada family. The clear tone they made drew goosebumps on my arms.
緊張を打つ武士が誓いを立てるときはこうするもんなんだと
I have now learned a thing. Kincho, the act of bumping the mouth of two sword sheaths, symbolically taken as a vow between two warriors. Damn, that's... I gotta remember this shit. Oh, really? Interesting.
俺もお前も正式には武士じゃねえから所詮真似事だが
Why?
証だ俺は必ず戻ってくるお前も生き延びて俺に会うっていう証を今立てたんだだから信じて待っていろ死なずにな
His words were confident, and listening to him, I felt as if they'd somehow made me stronger, more capable. As someone who dreamt of being a true samurai, that oath meant a great deal to him. I had to follow through. There could be no breaking this promise. I understand. I will protect Kondo-san, and I will survive. Until Hijikata-san returns, I must protect Kondo-san until the end. He had given me a chance to show that I was useful. and he trusted me with an important task. Then, I would complete that task, no matter what. We need to protect Kondo-san. We must survive. Ah! Slowly, the Koyo Regulatory Company found itself driven into a corner. Kondo-san did his best to try and explain to them that he and his men were only there to protect the area around Kofu Castle, in hopes that the situation might be resolved without bloodshed. Unfortunately, one of the new recruits cried out that they were the Shinsengumi and opened fire on the castle's defenders. This was the spark that lit the power keg. That one soldier is an idiot! The bulk of our opponent's forces turned out to be men from the Tosa domain who had been trained in Western tactics and weapons. Our guns were old and didn't have the range to match the Tosa's. It quickly became a hopeless battle. Kondo-san had no choice but to retreat. We have to go, Kondo-san! If we don't go now, you'll be killed!
しかし、大使たちがまだ戦っているというのに、我々だけ逃げるわけには。
Kondo-san! If you stay here, then you'll be killed too! Even if we lose this battle, Hijikata-san says that as long as you're safe, there's still hope. We can regroup and fight back later! I grabbed Kondo-san's hand and pulled him as hard as I could towards the road down the mountain. He looked across the battlefield at his men. They were hopelessly outnumbered, many already fallen. The smell of death stung our noses. I saw tears well up at the corners of his eyes. He bowed deeply towards the men still engaged in battle just as Saito returned from the front line. His steely expression was colored by streaks of ash and dust from the battlefield.
撤退の準備は整ったか。では行くぞ。
Right. Come on, Kondo-san. We have to go. And we ran. Saito and I took hold of him and ran into the forest to escape under cover of night. We'll be in Hachioji soon, Kondo-san. Hang in there. Perhaps it was because I'd never seen him lose before, but this was the first time I'd seen Kondo-san so drained.
大使たちをたくさん死なせてしまったな。
You can't beat yourself up over that now. Like Hijikata-san said, we just don't have what it takes to be in an army with Western weapons and tactics. I might as well have kept my mouth shut for all that my words seemed to reach him. Kondo-san continued staring numbly beyond us.
対象が俺じゃなくて別の誰かだったら、あいつらも死なずに済んだかもしれんな。
Are you listening to me? I said... Just then.
おい、そこにいるのは誰だ?
From the other side of the bushes, I heard a voice that didn't sound familiar. I peeked out just long enough to catch sight of a uniform that didn't belong to any of our soldiers. We froze. Saito, however, looked straight to the bushes.
我々の声が聞こえんのか? 今確かに物音がしたぞ。
俺が時間を稼ぐ。あんたは局長を連れて逃げろ。
Thank you, Saito. I gave him a quick bow of thanks and then tiptoed away, Kondo-san in tow. We had to rush down the mountain as quickly as possible. Just as I had finally managed to get Kondo-san moving at a decent pace, a shadow leapt out of the undergrowth to bar our way.
ここを通ると思っていました。
The shadow was none other than the demon Amagiri, companion of Kazuma.
雪村君、彼は確か薩摩藩の手の者だったな。これ以上逃げ切るのはどう考えても無理だろう。ここは潔く負け戦の責任を取って腹を詰めたい。そちらの御仁、解釈を願えるか。
Oh my god, Kondo-san! Kaishaku, an appointed executioner who beheads criminals committing seppuku to lessen their pain. Holy shit, Kondo-san, no! No! God! Ah! What? No! I can't let you die here! Amagiri had remained silent for our short exchange, but now he spoke up.
私は薩摩藩のために働いてはいますが、新選組の方々を切れとの命令は受けておりません。用があるのはそちらの娘だけです。
Of course. Of course. Me.
君とあの土方という若者は風間を狂わせる。
Vexed! Hold on, young man, I think Hijikata is technically a bit older.
藩の意向を無視し、単独行動ばかり起こす彼に、薩摩藩も手を焼いています。
Troubled, huh?
だが我々としても今、薩摩藩と手を切るわけにはいかない。ですから。
Amagiri's eyes promised violence and his body tightened, ready to make good on that promise. Saito, we need you!
雪村千鶴。ここで死んでもらいます。
What? Wait, what? He had no weapon, but I knew just how powerful he was, even without one. I had been carrying the finest sword ever made. Had I been carrying the finest sword ever made, he still could have ended my life easily. Nonetheless, I wouldn't let myself be killed. No matter how futile that fight might prove to be, I drew my sword. Kono-san, go! This man is after me and only me. You must escape. I'll be fine. I have a sword, and he has no weapons at all. Please. The Shinsengumi needs you. You can't abandon them. Kondo-san's mouth hung slack for a moment, speechless. Then he shut it, set his jaw, and drew his sword. Kono-san!
理由があろうと、女子供を見捨てて逃げるなど武士のすることではない。
Kondo-san, what are you saying? Without a word, Kondo-san got in stance, slowly closing the distance between Amagiri and himself.
これは敗残の将だ。無謀な作戦でたくさんの部下を死に追いやった。そんな俺が女性を守って死ぬことができるんだ。 武士として、男としては最高の死に方じゃないかね。
No! His face was calm and serene, and there was no hesitation in his eyes. I'd seen that look before, on Inoue's face, just before he died under Kazuma's blade. He couldn't be convinced. His mind was made up. Dad, no! When he spoke, his voice rang with determination.
新選組局長、近藤勇、参る。にゃー!
His sword held high, he charged towards Amagiri. No! He was going to die, just like Inoue had. I buried my face in my hands. overcome with despair and helplessness. But then... the intense force of their clash made my body tremble. Amagiri instantly faced Kondo-san.
か弱き者のために勝ち目のない戦いに挑む。そういう無謀さは嫌いではありません。
At the last moment, he slid aside as if made of water. He grasped Kondo-san's blade with his left hand and drove it right into Kondo-san's stomach. As Kondo-san began to fall forward towards the ground, Amagiri flipped him around so that he slammed directly onto his back.
灰袋を思い切り叩きました。しばらく呼吸ができないはずです。
Saito, we need you! He glanced down at Kondo-san, groaning on the ground, then turned his eyes to me.
さて、次は君です。雪村千鶴。悪く思わぬよ。
Amagiri swung his fist mercilessly. His fist pounded me to the ground, and as I had no time to dodge his pacey attacks, I felt like my whole body was going to shatter, and during the pain, I got back up.
我々の力量の差は先ほどのでよく理解できたはずですが。
We're gonna put up a fight!
まだあがくつもりですか。
I will fucking put up a fight, damn it.
いいでしょう。ならば今しばらくはお付き合いいたします。
While clutching my kodachi, I assumed my stance before performing an all-out charge towards Amagiri. However, he evaded my attack with no effort. I couldn't let one swift dodge deter me. I muttered this to myself, and I started to swing once, twice, and then thrice at him. Ooh, thrice! That's a word I don't see often. However, Amagiri's elegant technique moved him out of the path of my blade, like splitting the path of water. No matter how many times I charged and slashed at him, there was no way my blade would connect with him. Then finally... I hadn't seen his leg move until it slammed into my arm with the force of a cannonball. Oh, God! Immediately, the pain was so overwhelming, it felt as if time had stopped. I could no longer hold my kodachi, and it clanged as it fell to the floor. Really should be ground. My hands clasped the area where he kicked me, and my knees fell to the floor. No, I had to get up. My brain screamed at me to move, to pick up my sword and fight, but the roar of pain drowned it out.
勝負あったようですね。悪く思わないでください。すぐ楽になれるよう、一撃であの世へ送ってあげましょう。
I'm sorry, Hijikata-san. I thought to myself. You said to protect Kondo-san. You told me to survive. But in the end, I couldn't do anything right. I squeezed my eyes shut as the tears slid down my cheeks and waited for the blow to fall.
おい、どうしてそこで諦めちまうんだ。新選組の大使なら最後の最後まで生き延びて敵を出し抜くことだけを考える。
That voice. It couldn't be. My head shut up, just in time to see Hijikata-san leap through the air and land a sword blow on Amagiri's arm.
君は
甲府で戦う相手は新政府軍だけかと思ってたが、つい鬼退治させられる羽目になるとは思わなかった。
Our boy is here!
先日の風間との戦闘から何も学び取っていないのですか。君たち羅刹はまがいものの鬼です。それがいくら力をつけたところで本物の鬼にかなうはずがない。
そりゃやってみなきゃわからねえだろ。剣術3倍弾って知ってるか。刀を取った時都市空拳で倒すにゃ相手の3倍の実力が必要なんだ。
あくまでも修羅の道を歩み続けますか。いいでしょう。相手をしてあげます。
He gave Hijikata-san a short, polite bow and dropped himself easily into a ready stance. People are doing shit upstairs and I don't know what, but they're banging on the floor. Hijikata-san's... Oh god, why do I have to say the sword's name? Hijikata-san's Izumi no Kami Kanasara flickered through the air, little more than a streak of silver. Amagiri blocked with one hand and dodged away from the flickering blade. Before Hijikata-san could react, Amagiri's foot drove itself into his stomach. Hijikata-san's face twisted in pain and he staggered back a step. Perhaps it was his fury-born strength, or perhaps it was simply adrenaline, but he surged back and leapt towards Amagiri. Ooh! His sword leapt forward to bury itself in Amagiri's chest. Oh shit! Blood spurted out, splashing across Hijikata-san's face. Wait. There's no line there. He jerked back, pulling his sword free. No sooner was it out than the wound began to close. Oh, that's what that reaction was. Okay. His sword shone with fresh blood. Police car going sirens. What the fuck? Drenched in blood, Hijikata-san looked more like a monster than a human being. His eyes were wide and hungry. There was something terrifying and inhuman about his expression as he whipped his sword through the air. Amagiri leapt back, Hijikata-san's sword almost catching his fingers as he did so. Jabs and parries, feints and counter-feints. The battle flowed between them like a living thing, its changes moving too fast for any mortal eye to track. Neither man showed any signs of tiring as they dodged and attacked in ways that would have been unthinkable to any human. Even in the middle of that maelstrom of death and violence, I could see Hijikata-san smiling. The smell of blood hung heavy in the air, and his grin spoke of a furious lust for death.
まさか私と互角に渡り合える羅刹が存在したとは予想外でした。その比類なき力、一体何に使うつもりです？
何？大切なもんを守るために決まってるだろう。力を
大切なもの。君にとっては徳川幕府ですか？
そうじゃね。もっと別の幕府とは比べ物にならねえくらい大きくて大切なもんだ。
Damn. Amagiri closed his eyes and was silent. What had gotten into him? Why had he stopped fighting? This was the perfect time to strike. I reached down slowly and picked up the sword I dropped only minutes before. Oh no, are we gonna... Jesus, damn! I began to move forward when a hand on my shoulder stopped me. Where the fuck have you been? But Hijikata-san is going to... He's right, because Amagiri respects respect. What?
鬼である我々は本来人の世界に関わるべきではない。羅刹となった君も歴史の表に出てはいけない生き物です。
ああ、そりゃ分かってる。俺は別に歴史に名を残してとか大それた望みは抱いちゃいね。
Yeah, about that.
分かっているのなら、あとは君に任せます。風間は我が強く気ぐらいの高い鬼だ。以前屈辱を味わわせた君を絶対に許しはしないでしょう。君が勝つ可能性は低い。ですがそれでも守りたい何かがあるというのなら、守るためのその力、大切に使ってください。
In his own stoic way, Hijikata-san looked as confused as I felt. Could Amagiri be trusted? What were his true intentions? His true intentions are absolutely what comes out of his mouth.
そしてもう一つ、君に伝えておかなければならないことがあります。羅刹の力は決して神仏からの授かり物ではない。人並み以上の腕力、敏捷性、そして驚異的な回復力。それはすべて君の体に秘められたもの。本来数十年かけて使い果たしてゆくはずの力を借りているに過ぎません。
Oh. My hands flew to my mouth. By borrowing, did he mean that when Hijikata-san used the speed and strength of a fury, he was picking away at his future? His life?
力を使えば使うほど残りの寿命が短くなっちまうってことか。
そういうことです。
なるほど。話がうますぎると思ったんだ。ま、薩長と殺し合いやってんのに残りの寿命もクソもねえからな。それぐらいどうってことねえよ。
では私はもう行きます。
ちょっと待ってくれ。一つ聞かせてほしいんだ。
何でしょ
う。俺を見逃しちまっていいのか。このまま放っておいたら俺はきっとあの風間ってやつを殺すことになるぜ。
君に倒されるならばその程度の男だということでしょう。我ら鬼は情でつながっているわけではない。
Well, boy, I'm a giddy Jesus. Then, with a last polite nod, he disappeared into the night. Holy shit. His enemy gone at last, Hijikata-san slumped and took a long, deep breath. Hijikata-san, are you alright?
なんともねえ。それより近藤さんはどうした？
局長ならあちらに。
Hichikata-san nodded and ran over to the chief.
近藤さん、無事か？どこか怪我してねえか？
You okay? He looked as if he had seen a ghost. Well, I mean... Hichikata-san stood before him, his white hair and red eyes bright in the moonlight. A fury.
年その姿
Oh! Did he not? Hijikata. Boy. Hijikata-san started and then looked away, almost guilty. Kondo-san stared at him for a moment before asking in a soft, stunned voice.
なったのか羅刹
Oh, this hurts.
まあな、しょうがねえよ。これも新選組を勝たせるためだ。
For a moment, he sounded very composed, but as I peered closer, I realized that he was desperately avoiding Kondo-san's gaze. He couldn't bear to look his friend in the eye. We were silent for several moments, and when the first raindrops hit me, it took me by surprise. Holy shit! Rain! I don't think we've ever seen rain, have we? I don't think we've seen rain before till now. Holy shit.
降り出してきた。さっさと江戸に戻って体勢を立て直さねえとな。
Come on, Kondo-san. We have to hurry. I turned to make sure Kondo-san was following, but he simply stood there, as if he'd forgotten how to walk. Kondo-san? Is something wrong? It began to rain harder, and still Kondo-san didn't move. Rain ran down his cheeks to his chin. Or were they tears?
俺は今まで一体何をしてたんだろうな。今日の戦で俺を信じてついてきてくれた若い連中をたくさん死なせてしまった。その上昔からの付き合いのお前を羅刹にしてしまうなんて。
近藤さん、いきなり何を言い出すんだ。誰もあんたのせいだなんて思ってねえよ。どんな名軍師だって様式化された軍を相手にして勝つことなんざできねえ。俺だってとばくしに大事な山崎を死なせちまってるんだ。負けちまったのはしょうがねえ。大事なのはこれからどうやって勝負をひっくり返すかってことだろう。それに俺は別に羅刹になったことを後悔なんてしてねえよ。むしろ人間をはるかに超えた力を手に入れられて、それはあんたのために役立てられる。嬉しくてしょうがねえさ。
Rain poured down their faces. Surely it was my imagination, but for a moment it almost looked as though Hijikata-san was crying. Kondo-san stared at him for a long moment, then finally drew himself up.
すまない。弱気になってしまったな。今の言葉は忘れて。
Something in his voice told me that even he didn't quite believe that. Oh, that hurts. Ah. So how far are we taking this historical events? I'm not gonna be prepared for this route, am I? We returned to Edo to meet up with Nakakura and the rest of our forces who were at the Hatamoto mansion. Kondo-san, rather unexpectedly, was disconsolated from his first defeat on the battlefield, more so than most of the captains had expected. Even after he had returned to headquarters, he spent most of his time moping. I don't blame the man. Yoshinobu, the supreme commander of the shogunate army, was ordered out of the imperial court and into house arrest at the Kane Temple in Ueno. House arrest, a punishment inflicted by the government upon those who sought to undermine their authority with political expeditions. Kane Temple, a shrine dedicated to the Tokugawa clan. It was established by Iemitsu Tokugawa and founded by High Priest Tenkai in 1625. 6 of the 15 Tokugawa shoguns have been buried there. Well, that's interesting. The imperial court was now in the hands of the Satsuma and the Choshu, making it painfully clear that the loyalist faction was in a numerically untenable position. It is still March. I need water. I can't reach it. I got it. It still tastes like strawberry tea for some damn reason. I guess I should have washed it before I put new water in, but oh well. It'll taste faintly of strawberry tea. Sometime later, I was sweeping the entrance when I looked up to see Saito-san on his way out. Oh, Saito-san. Are you off to work? Have a good day. Without even waiting for me to respond, he gave a curt nod and was off. Bye, Saito! Saito had never been talkative, but lately he'd seem exceptionally there's that word again. Taciturn, something. Perhaps he was still upset over what had happened. Oh, right, this. Oh, God, this has just happened. Oh. Are you guys really leaving?
ああ、もう決めちまったんだ。俺たちと近藤さんじゃ目指してるものが全然違う。これから先一緒にやっていけるとは思えねえ。
It's going to be lonely here without you. What are you going to do now?
今んとこまだ決めてねえけど、これからも薩長と戦うってのは変わらねえぜ。
そのうち俺があいつらを何百人切ったって知らせがこっちにも届くと思うから楽しみに待っててくれよ。
そんじゃ元気だな。
You too. We'd been so close. It was sad to see them go. Then again, I'd only known them a few years. How sad their departure had to be for Kondo-san, Hijikata-san, and Saito-san, who'd known them much, much longer. And one more person who's not here right now. Okita's condition worsened, and he'd been moved to a separate house in Sendagaya. One by one, our friends from Shiei Hall were disappearing. Why had it come to this, I wondered. cleaning suddenly felt particularly pointless. I decided to go make some tea and see if Hijikata-san was in his room. Hijikata-san, I've brought you some tea. I opened the door as I spoke and stopped. Peeking halfway in, I saw Sanan-san and Heisuke. All three faces were set in hard lines. Whatever I had interrupted, it was serious. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you were in the middle of a meeting. I began to back away as quickly as I could when... His words froze me in place. But before I could reply, Sanan-san spoke.
羅刹隊の増強を中止せよとは一体どういうことです？
そのままの意味だ。今後羅刹隊の隊士を増やすつもりはね。今いる人員で何とかしてくれ。
その命令には納得できません。今の新選組の兵力を考えると羅刹隊の増強は急務のはずです。先ほど東堂君から聞きました。長倉君と原田君が脱退してしまったと。彼らの離脱は相当の痛手です。新たな大使を募ったところで所詮は烏合の衆。敵が近づいてくればすぐに逃げ出してしまう。そんな者たちに期待をかけるより我々羅刹隊の力をもっと生かすべきではないですか。
I feel Heisuke on this. Heisuke looked down at the floor. He said nothing since I'd arrived, but it was clear that from his face that, fury or not, he didn't always agree with Sanan-san. I stood tensely, watching their cold, fixed gazes.
確かに兵力を増強することだけ考える。羅刹隊を強化するのが一番手っ取り早いだ。
ならばどうして？
だが羅刹には重大な欠点がある。これは信頼できる筋から得た情報だ。
You meant to tell Sanan-san that he'd learned from Amagiri.
羅刹の力の源はその人間の寿命だ。つまり力を使えば使うほどこの先生きていられる時間が短くなっちまう。
なんですって？
Ah. Sanan-san's eyes, usually so cool and calculating, went wide as saucers behind his glasses. Suddenly, he dropped to his knees as the realization of his powerlessness immediately registered to him. Ah, shit.
やむを得ねえ時を除いて羅刹の力はなるべく使わねえに越したことはねえ。
The color had drained from his face. Silence filled the room for several long seconds before Sanan-san finally raised his head and spoke.
でしたら、なおさら研究を進めるべきでしょう。研究を続ければ、その欠点を補う方法も見つかるかもしれない。それは、羅刹となった君のためにも必要なことのはずです。
副長命令だ。羅刹の研究は中止してくれ。もちろん部隊の増強もなしだ。
Sanan-san said nothing. Instead, he simply glared at Hijikata-san as seconds stretched into minutes.
Sanan-san, 行こうぜ。
He sat unmoving for a few more moments, until at last he sagged, defeated, and turned to Heisuke. There were lines in his face, perhaps proof that his life was already leaving him steadily.
わかりました。
Sanan-san and Heisuke were turned to leave had turned to leave the room when
あれ近藤さん、こんなところで何してるんだ？
いや、ちょっと散歩に出ようと思ってな。たまたま通りかかっただけだ。気にしないでくれ。
I heard them exchange a few short pleasantries in the hallway, and then 3 sets of footsteps faded away. The room grew awkwardly silent. Hijikata-san sighed and let his gaze drift out the window. The tea's cold now. I'll go pour you a new one.
喉が渇いているからな。これくらいでちょうどいい。
He took a sip and sighed again quietly, a distant look in his eyes. He'd taken on a tremendous workload, tiring him day in and out, and he looked drained beyond all reason. How hard had Nagakura and Harada's departure hit him?
新八と原田の足抜けは相当の痛手か。正論だよな。返す言葉もねえ。
His voice shook almost in... What is that word? What? Imperceptibly. Why is English like this? And why do they pick very big words that has a very simple one so I could understand them? And his mouth curled into a bitter smile as he spoke.
いずれこうなるだろうってのは覚悟してたし、あの二人に夢を見せてやれなかったのは俺たちの落ち度だ。にしても新選組も人が随分減って様変わりしちまったな。
I couldn't imagine what was going through his head. To be a leader and command the loyalty and obedience of tens or hundreds of men was something I couldn't begin to understand. Every night, he worked until the sun came up. It was painful for the Furies to be up during the day, but every day, Hijikata-san met with shogunate representatives. Even I could see the horrible toll it was taking on his body. What could I do for him? You can tell him to stop. Please, Hijikata-san, you have to stop.
やめろってのはどういう意味だ。
His voice was much harder than I expected, and it gave me pause. No, I thought to myself. This was something I had to say. I'm only telling you to do what you told Sun and Sun to do a few minutes ago. Don't use your fury abilities unless it's an emergency.
なんでお前にそんなことを指図されなきゃいけねえんだ。
Well, you became a fury because you were protecting me from Kazuma. If you hadn't fought a demon, then you'd still be a human now. You wouldn't have had to.
前に言わなかったか。俺は俺の意志で落ち水を飲んだんだ。誰に強制されたわけでもね。
When you say things like that, it just makes it worse. If you're in pain, please just say so. Can't you just tell me the truth? Don't you wish you'd never become a fury? For a moment, the room was silent, and then Hijikata-san began to laugh. Eh?!
叶わねえな、本当に。いや、お前も江戸の女なんだなって思ってる。前に話したっけか。俺は玉の百姓の家の末っ子でな。親 親父もおふくろも割と早くに亡くなっちまったから、4つ上の姉貴に面倒を見てもらってたんだ。その姉貴の喋り方がお前に少し似ててな。
Me too.
当時の姉のミツさんも同じような感じだったな。
Mitsu. Mitsu, Soji Okita's elder sister, who serves as the Okita family's current head. After marrying her husband, the two chose to manage the family's estate. Their other sister, Kin, was married off.
身内に叱られてるみたいで、言うことを聞かなきゃならねえような気にさせられちまう。
Ha! Really? I never heard him talk about his childhood like that before. Or at all. It felt surreal.
あの天霧とかいう鬼が言ってた通りなのは、羅刹の力を使わなきゃ寿命が縮んだりはしねえってことだ。本当にどうしようもねえくらい辛くなったらそういうさ。だから心配するな。
He'd likely keep most of his pain to himself. That was just who he was. But if he really meant that he would tell me when it became unbearable. All right, I understand. I take his word for it this time. So, what would the Shinsengumi be doing now?
とりあえず近藤さんに気合を入れ直してもらって北に行こうと思ってる。
North?
今の幕府は頼りにならねえが、東北諸藩が残ってる。会津、仙台が中心になりゃ、まだまだ戦えるはずだ。
Hold on! Who is responsible for writing tits on a bull? Who is just who the fuck is responsible for that line?
松本先生の手配で流山に武器弾薬、そして人を集めてもらってる。そこで皆と合流して会津に向かう。
Nagareyama, you say?
仮に江戸を薩長に取られたとしても、奴らはいずれ京に戻らなきゃならねえはずだ。そうなったらすぐ江戸を取り戻して。
Suddenly his body twisted and hunched, and he grasped a hand to his suddenly heaving chest. Round 2. Hijikata-san's eyes bulged from his head in pain. Hundreds of sweat beads appeared all over his face. Hijikata-san, what's wrong? He only shook his head, unable to speak through the pain. I'd seen him like this before. Is it the bloodlust? He didn't respond, but I'd known he was right even as I asked. Say it with me now. We give him blood. Hijikata-san was in pain. I had no other choice. With steady hands, I unsheathed my kodachi and laid the edge against my fingers, ready to cut. But Hijikata-san's hand on my wrist stopped me. Why? Whoa. God fucking damn it. I thought I saw something on my mic, and I saw nothing. My brain is hallucinating. Why? The pain will go away if you drink blood. I tried to pull away, but he held fast and shook his head. He moved around behind me and loosened my collar. Oh! I felt the cool air touch my neck, followed by Hijikata-san's fingers. He was looking for a place to make the cut. A moment later, I felt the kiss of the cold blade against my skin, and then, without a sound, I felt it sink in. I bit my lip at the pain, but said nothing. I just entrusted my body to Hijikata-san. Eventually. His warm lips touched the cut on my neck, and then I felt his face press against me as he began to drink. Again and again he drank, as thirsty as a man who had been stranded in the desert. I could feel his breath on my skin. It made me shiver. Never before had I been so close to a man. Nerves made my body begin to twist until Hijikata-san's hands grabbed my shoulders. When he spoke, his voice was low and husky. I realized suddenly that he didn't want me to see him in his fury state. Those few words at last strained defense of his wounded pride. A last strained defense of his wounded pride tore at my heart, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. For his sake, I did my best to calm my breathing, rapid from nerves and excitement. Though I did my best to hide it, there was no denying that my heart was beating faster and faster. Was he saying that to convince me? Or to convince himself? Of course. I understand. You don't have to hold back. I want to help, in whatever way I can. The day that I'd watch Inoue and Yamazaki die, I'd felt a horrible, torturous regret. There had been nothing I could do for them. Ever since, I'd cursed myself into being unable to help the Shinsengumi, after they'd sheltered me and protected me for so long. But now, at last, there was something I could do. I could ease Hijikata-san's thirst. I felt his grip on me tighten. Emotion washed over me. Guilt, disappointment, anger, regret. And I realized they were Hijikata-san's. His hands were warm. Eventually, he let go slowly and stepped away. His breathing had returned to normal, and there was color in his face again. No. It's nothing, see? The cut's already closed up. I'll be staying here for quite a while. So if you ever need me, please just let me know. I nodded and he gave me a crooked smile. He was only joking and I knew it, but there was a part of me that felt if it was Hijikata-san who used me up, then maybe it wouldn't be so bad. I had to give it up. I couldn't keep it. I couldn't keep a straight face to that line. Alright. Back to default. Sometime after that incident, we began to move to Nagaoka in Nagarayama, a mansion east of Edo. Oh god. Shimosanokuni, a region east of Edo. Currently, it is known as the northern section of the Chiba prefecture. Oh. Kondo-san had become reluctant to go into battle, but after several talks with Hijikata-san, he was eventually convinced otherwise. Until we'd finish our preparations for our journey to Aizu, we would be training in Nagarayama. Oh, this is gonna hurt. Saito was visiting some place named Ichikawa, where he would be training to use new modern armaments. I can read. No. Ichikawa, the location of Shimosa's provincially run government. Shogunate forces used this as a base of operations before fleeing to Aizu. Sanan-san and Heisuke had left with the Fury Corps along the Utsunomiya route to Aizu, since they couldn't go to the Kaneko mansion.
Yukimura senpai, 局長はどこですか?
Oh, Kondo-san is in his room reading a book. Is something the matter?
いえ、特に用事ってわけじゃないんですけど。
Nomura had a peculiar look on his face, as if there was something on his mind.
局長はもしかして新政府軍と戦う気力をなくしてしまったのかなって。
Well, I don't think that's the case. I wouldn't say that he's completely lost his will to fight. Nomura seemed hesitant to respond as he stayed silent for a moment, but eventually...
そうっすよね。局長はあの土方副長が尊敬している方なんですから。きっとすぐに元の局長に戻るに決まってますよね。すいませんでした。変なことを聞いて。
With that, Nomura quickly scurried off, entering the side of the building. He raised a good point, though. Ever since we had arrived here, Kondo-san seemed like a different person. The ambitious fire in his eyes grew a little dimmer. He would either lock himself up in his room, or he'd spend time reading or contemplating in the garden. But I held onto the sliver of hope that his confidence was only a little deflated from the defeat in Kofu. I knew that surely his confidence would soon be restored and would return to his usual self. Kondo-san, I brought you some tea. He paused in the act of flipping a page to smile up at me. What are you reading?
三国志演義に清正記に軍記物の読み物ばかりだな。
Always expect romance of the Three Kingdoms. The biography of Kiyomasa, a biography of Kiyomasa Kaito, a military commander during the Warring States War Chronicle, a story that details the exploits of warriors and daimyo, I can't say that correctly for some reason, daimyo, who had served in the Warring States period, organized and woven as a comprehensive narrative.
もう暗唱できるくらい読み込んだんだが、何度読み返しても新たな感動があってな。子供の頃は思ってたもんだよ。いつか関西帝君みたいに立派な武将になって、自分ではない誰かのために戦おうって。
Kansei Teikun, a general who had served under Liu Bei? A Chinese warlord who lived during the late Han dynasty. This name was bestowed upon him as a gesture of defecation? He grinned like a young boy, but after a moment, the grin faded.
願うだけでは名将にはなれんのだな。それに気づくのがちと遅かったよう
He shut the book softly, not shockily, softly, and set it down on top of his desk. What are you talking about? You've only just begun. But he didn't even seem to hear me.
な。トシはどうしている？
I think he's up in his room, writing something. Probably orders for Saito-san. He's off in Ishikawa right now, you know.
そうか。トシには無理ばかりさせてるな。
I don't think he's pushing himself too hard. And nothing makes him happier than being able to help you. That's just the kind of guy he is.
すっかりトシの交渉役が板についている。あいつのことをよくわかってるじゃないか。
You think so? He seemed quite serious about it, and I felt my cheeks getting warm. That's right. Back when I first got here, I was supposed to be his page or something.
そうだな。まさかこんなに長い付き合いになるとはあいつも予想してなかっただろう。
Before I knew it, we were reminiscing about the time we'd spent in Kyoto. Back then, we never could have guessed what the Sacho Alliance would take, that the Sacho Alliance would take control of the imperial court or reinstate the emperor. There were many challenges we faced, but I thought we'd continue our lives as they were in Kyo. But I know things will work out. Hijikata-san will get us through this. He responded with a melancholy laugh.
だがな、雪村。俺はそれも酷じゃないかと思うのだよ。
What do you mean? Before he could answer, the door slid open with a snap, and Hijikata and Shimada ran in, their faces tense and drawn. Hijikata-san, what's happened?
すぐ逃げる準備をしてくれ。ここは敵に囲まれてる。
Ah, shit. What?
敵兵は2、300あります。奴らに気づかれないよう裏口からここに入ってきました。
せめて桁が一つ少なきゃどうにかできたんだがな。
Hijikata-san worked his lip and glanced out the window, frustrated and tense.
今からじゃ斎藤たちを呼び戻す時間もね。俺が何とかするしかなさそうだ。島田、それから雪村、近藤さんを連れて先に逃げてくれ。
What? Hijikata-san, not even you can take on that many people. And it's daytime out there.
そんなのやってみなきゃわかんねえだろ。
Man has a death sentence.
しかし相手は銃を主体とした部隊です。
Both Shimada and I moved toward the door in an effort to physically stop Hijikata-san if it came to that. Kondo-san was in quiet contemplation, since Hijikata-san and Shimada had entered, but now he finally spoke.
待ってくれ。トシがそこまでする必要はない。俺が向こうの本陣へ行くよ。
This moment.
何を言ってやがる。みすみす死にに行くようなものじゃねえか。
もちろん新選組の近藤だとは名乗らんよ。偽名を使って別人になりすますつもりだ。俺たちは旗本でこの辺りを警備してる鎮圧部隊だと言えばごまかせるだろう。お前たちが逃げる時間くらいは稼げるはずだ。
Shimada and I were both shocked into silence, but not Hijikata-san.
バカかあんた。あいつらが そんな甘い連中だと思ってんのか。今日で散々見てきたじゃねえか。奴らは俺たちを恨んでねえはずがねえ。すぐに気づかれて捕まえられるに決まってるだろう。
仮に捕まってしまったとしても、俺はもう大名の位をもらってるんだぞ。そう簡単に殺されはしないさ。
あんたは甘いんだよ。幕府からもらった身分なんて奴らには毛ほどの価値もねえ。殺されちまうのが分かってるのにみすみす生かせられるはずがねえじゃねえか。
No matter what Hijikata-san said, Kondo-san's expression didn't change. He only gazed back at him, his expression cool and placid.
お前が何を言っても無駄だ。もう決めてしまったことだからな。
Hijikata-san began to shake. In all the time I've been with the Shinsengumi, I'd never seen Hijikata-san and Kondo-san act like this before. Usually it was Hijikata-san who kept a cool head, and Kondo-san who succumbed to his emotions. But this time...
ふざけんじゃねえ。大将のあんたがいなくて何が新選組だ。俺はあんたを引きずってでも連れて行くからな。今さら逃げ出すなんて許すもんかよ。あんたの命はもうあんた一人のものじゃねえんだ。
Hijikata-san was screaming at Kondo-san, his white-knuckled fist gripping the front of the other man's kimono, and his eyes red with held-back tears. But his fury and pleas broke across Kondo-san's impassable calm, like wind against a mountain.
ならばこれは命令だ。島田君と雪村君を連れて市川の隊と合流せよ。
Hijikata-san stumbled back a step, shocked by the force of Kondo-san's voice.
俺に命令するのか、あんたが。何に合わねえ真似してんだよ。
His eyes were still dry, but his voice trembled.
局長の命令は絶対なんだろう。大使たちに切腹や羅刹化を命じておいて、自分たちだけは特別扱いか。それが俺たちの望んだ武士の姿か。
Oh, God. Hijikata-san said nothing. As long as he'd been commander, Hijikata-san strove to lead by example. He lived by the code and demanded others to do likewise to groom the Shinsengumi into true samurai. No doubt Kondo-san had counted on that fact. He meant to use it to keep Hijikata-san alive.
島田君、雪村君、トシと一緒に早く逃げてくれ。もたもたしていると連中が押し入ってくるぞ。そうなると俺が投降する意味がなくなってしまう。
He gave Shimada and me a little shove to get us moving, and Shimada turned to look at Hijikata-san. For a moment, he said nothing.
副長、行きましょう。
Hijikata-san didn't move. He only stood, chewing at his lip until Kondo-san laid his hands on his friend's shoulders and gave him a warm smile.
トシ、そろそろ楽にさせてくれないか。
Listen, I knew it was coming. I knew this was coming. I knew it was coming a mile fucking away. But this hurts.
ちこち走り回ってしまいには羅刹にまでなってしまって、そんな姿を見てる方が俺は辛いんだ。俺はお前にそこまでしてもらうほどの男じゃないからな。
Hijikata-san didn't look up. He blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears, and stared desperately at the floor. Then he swallowed, and when he spoke, his voice was tight and strained.
俺のしたことは何だったんだ。侍になってお上に仕えて戦に勝ち続けて、そうすりゃあんたは一緒に喜んでくれるんだとばかり。
From Hijikata-san's mouth came an outpouring of dejection, not unlike how Kondo-san was after the defeat at Kofu Castle.
すまないな。お前にそこまでさせたのはこの俺だ。俺がお前を追い詰めたんだ。思えば儚い夢だったな。侍でも何でもない俺たちが腰に刀を刺してご公儀のために働いてたなんて。
His voice was warm, but it seemed that very kindness made it even harder for Hijikata-san. Hijikata-san took a deep breath and squeezed his eyes shut, willing the tears to go away. The room was silent before he finally spoke.
島田、残った大使たちに伝令だ。逃走経路も確保しとかねえとな。
はい。
雪村、お前はここで待ってろ。支度が済んだらすぐ呼びに来る。
Hi. With that, Hijikata-san and Shimada left, and Kondo-san and I were alone. He reached into his kimono and pulled something out.
雪村君、これを持って行きなさい。
Huh? He handed me a small cloth bag. It clinked as he laid it in my hand. What is it?
逃亡資金だ。君には何もしてやれなかったからな。せめてもの気持ちだ。受け取ってくれ。
Oh my god. Kondo-san! Oh god. Oh, shit. How could he be so kind when his situation was so grim? His warmth still lingered on the bag as I took it. I felt a lump rise in my throat.
今ならまだ間に合うはずだ。都市にも行っておくから、ここを出たら松本先生を頼ってどこかに逃げなさい。いくら薩長でも君のような女子にまでひどい真似はしないだろう。我々と関わったことは忘れて、好いた男と結婚して静かに暮らしなさい。それが女にとっての幸せだと思うよ。
Oh my god! Oh god, Kondo-san! What should I say? Oh my god. Oh my god. This man! I want to go with Hijikata-san. I appreciated Kondo-san's kind gesture, but I shook my head. No, I won't run. I want to go with Hijikata-san. I'm his page. I bit my lip, afraid that if I said any more, I might cry. Bitch, I'm already crying. Instead, I looked up at Kondo-san and did my best to smile. His eyes were warm as he looked down at me.
そうか。トシはいい部下に恵まれたな。トシのことをこれからもよろしく頼むよ。
I tried to respond, but the lump in my throat made any sort of speech impossible. Eventually, Hijikata and Shimada returned. He gathered all of the remaining warriors, including Soma and Nomura.
局長を置いて我々だけ逃げるって本当ですか、副長?
Oh God, give me a second! Ah.
局長命令だ。お前ら、俺と一緒にここから脱出してもらう。
ですが、このまま投降したらすぐ正体を見破られるに決まってます。せめて俺だけでも局長のおそばに。
局長命令だっつうのが聞こえねえのか。てめえ、さんの気遣いを無駄にするつもりか。
Someone looked like he wanted to respond, but instead he looked down as he tightened his fists and shook. Just then,
俺残ります。
Nomura!
副長の命令ですけど、新選組大使として局長を見捨てるわけにはいきません。
野村君。
られてえのか。
いや、その待ってください。
Nomura didn't even blink. Boy, what are you trying to do? His eyes burned with intense vigor as he glared back at Hijikata-san.
本当なら副長がここに残りたいはずですよね。でも局長から新選組を託された身だからそれができないわけで。だから俺が副長の代わりに局長をお守りします。
Hijikata-san curled his lip, staring down at Nomura for a long moment silently. Eventually, he unsheathed the Izumi no Kami Kanasara from the scabbard on his left hip.
副長。
As the exclamation left Shimada's mouth, Hijikata pointed the tip of his sword towards Nomura's throat.
近藤さんを守る。
Sweat trickled down Nomura's flushed cheeks. He met Hijikata-san's stare, fixing his gaze steadily before he nodded in a curt manner.
はい。
だったら絶対にやり遂げてみせろ。何があっても近藤さんのそばから離れるな。いいな。
Oh shit. No! Nomura's eyes grew wide. They trembled ever so slightly, but soon after, they brimmed with a fiery determination.
はい、野村利三郎、絶対に局長の恩義をお守りします。
It seemed Nomura convinced Hijikata-san as the latter returned his blade to its sheath. Nomura, boy, no! Hijikata-san's words were curt as he nodded briskly before leaving the residence behind. So in a short while, Kondo and Nomura will hand the terms of surrender to the Imperial Army. I looked back over my shoulder many times as we ran. Soon, Kondo-san would surrender to his enemies. Perhaps, I thought to myself time and again, if we turn back now, we can still rescue him. There have to be ways all four of us can escape. Shimada seemed to feel the same way, but Hijikata-san never once turned to look back. We ran and ran through the forest to Ichikawa. It didn't matter how quickly we got there, it wouldn't be soon enough to bring back an army to save Kondo-san. We all knew that, but Hijikata-san didn't slow down.
Yukimura-kun, 大丈夫ですか? なんなら俺がおぶっていきましょうか?
I'm fine. I can keep going. Hijikata, his back to us, said nothing, but I could feel how pained he was with each step he took from Kondo-san. Oh god. The sun had begun to dip towards the western horizon and night had started to fall when...
Oi! そこの者たち止まれ! どこへ向かうつもりだ?
He was dressed in a simple western uniform. Hijikata-san only frowned and made to walk past the soldier.
止まれと言っているだろう. 貴様、まさか爆兵か? いや、こいつの顔、どこかで見た覚えがあるぞ。そうだ、新選組の土方だ。なんだ、坂本殿を暗殺した新選組の副長か。
Oh, that's still going around? Ryoma Sakamoto, a ronin from Tosa who negotiated the alliance between Satsuma and Choshu for the purpose of overthrowing the Tokugawa shogunate. He played a crucial part in the restoring imperial rule. As they began to scramble for their guns, I noticed the mark of the Tosa domain on their uniforms. Unfortunately, they weren't fast enough for Hijikata-san. His hair snapped white and he shot towards the soldiers, kanasada in hand. His strike was so fast and elegant that the eye barely even had time to realize he had happened. Wait. His strike was so fast and elegant that the eye barely even had time to realize it had happened before two men fell dead to the ground. A volley of gunfire erupted from the rest of the Imperial soldiers nearby. I heard the wet thud of bullets hitting Hijikata-san. He stumbled, but almost immediately his wound began to close. Hijikata-san launched himself at the nearest of the riflemen, his sword already in motion and his face twisted by grief and anger. Even without the fury powers, Hijikata-san and Shimada could have made short work of the small troop of men. But rage and frustration boiled inside of him ever since we left Kondo-san, erupting in a torrent of violence. No! Stop! You can't use your powers! He had to understand what he was doing. He knew what he was doing, but he was past caring. Hijikata leapt from tree to tree, his sword flashing like lightning. Every time it moved, a life ended. Rage, anguish, and an unrestrained thirst for blood radiated out of him like heat from a fire. I could feel it, even from where I stood. Blood soaked his face, chest, and hands. Still, he cut and cut, never satisfied. I saw Shimada and Soma sweating as they stood silently, watching Hidekata-san fight as a fury. They were mesmerized. I couldn't blame them. Hidekata-san looked as if he'd forgotten how to do anything but kill. Every move he made drew blood, and every swing of his sword spilled a man out onto the dirt. He looked like a monster. At last, the only person still alive was Hijikata-san himself. Silence fell over the forest again. He turned to face us, every inch of his skin slick with blood.
Shimada, Soma, 他に敵がいねえか見てきてくれ。
はい。
すぐに行ってきます。
They disappeared into the forest, desperate to distance themselves from the carnage. His voice was cold and rough, like stones grinding against one another. Normally, I would have immediately done as he asked and headed off into the forest after Shimada. But this time, his words cut like a knife, but I didn't move. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. He sounded angry, as he often did, but behind that anger was a deep, miserable sadness. If he didn't stay angry, I felt, he would probably cry. I promise I won't get in your way. But please, just let me stay here with you. I knew there was nothing I could do for him, but neither could I bear to leave him alone. I refused to leave. He turned his back to me, to everything. His face was hidden from me. I have no idea what kind of expression he wore in his face. But suddenly, his tall back and broad shoulders seemed small, tired, and very, very lonely. What could I say to him? How could I make him feel better? I searched my soul for something, anything, but I came up empty. After interminable, miserable silence, he finally spoke. How could this be the card fate had dealt? Two men so honest and determined. It just didn't seem fair.
近藤さんを敵に譲り渡すためか。そのために今まで必死に走ってきたのか。あ の人を押し上げて、もっと高いところまで担ぎ上げてやりたかった。完成帝君や清正公どころじゃねえ。もっとすげえ戦をさせて本物の武将にしてやりたかった。片田舎の貧乏道場の主と百姓の息子で、どこまでいけるのか試してみたかった。
His voice had begun to shake. I wasn't even sure he still knew I was there. If he did, it seemed he no longer cared.
俺たちは同じ夢を見てたはずだ。あの人のためならどんなことだってできるって思ってた。なのに、どうして俺はここにいるんだ。近藤さんを置き去りにして、どうしててめえだけ助かってるんだよ。結局俺はあの人を見捨ててきたんじゃねえか。徳川の殿様と同じで、絶対に見捨てちゃいけねえ相手を捨てて、てめえだけ生き残ってるんじゃねえかよ。
It tore me apart to hear him talk like that. I couldn't bear to just stand and listen. I wrapped my arms around him as far as they would go and pressed my face against his back. He said nothing. Kondo-san said, after you'd left, I told him that you'd figure it out. And he said that I was asking too much of you. No, I told myself, you can't cry. The pain that Hijikata-san was feeling was far deeper than you could ever imagine. But to no avail. So the tears began to fall, and I struggled ahead. I know how much you care about Kondo-san, but he did what he did because he feels the same about you. Don't you see? It's not your fault. You can't blame yourself. Kondo-san didn't want you to die. That's why you're still alive. He ordered you to leave. You didn't have a choice. Just... please, don't blame yourself. Hijikata-san listened, saying nothing. Or perhaps he didn't even hear me. Why did words feel so powerless when I needed them most? What good were they if I couldn't comfort someone I cared for when they were at their lowest? After several long minutes, I felt Hijikata-san relax. He gave a short bark of laughter, but there was no humor in it. choked back a sob and fell silent. The night we decided on heading north, Hijikata-san, Soma, and I snuck back into Edo. When we arrived at a civilian's house, Soma mentioned he was going to visit a friend of his, and he left us. However, I just think Soma was trying to be considerate by giving Hijikata-san some space. The person who welcomed us in was...
こんばんは、土方さん、千鶴ちゃん。まさか僕のお見舞いに来てくれるなんて思いませんでしたよ。
And now you are here! No.
お前、起きても大丈夫なのか。しかもその格好。
ずっと一人で寝てるのにも飽き飽きしちゃって。このままじゃ活躍できそうにないし、そろそろみんなを追いかけようと思うんですけど。
ふざけたことを抜かすんじゃねえ。その体で刀を握れるわけねえだろうが。
そんなことありませんよ。このところすごく調子がいいんですから。
Well, that was a lie. Suddenly, Okuta was crouched on the floor, coughing painfully with strained breaths. Are you alright, Okita? I rubbed his back to comfort him as he caught his breath. At first glance, he may have looked to be improving, but upon closer inspection, he had lost a lot of weight, and it was almost painful to look at his thinning body. Okita bit his lips out frustration, grimacing at the thought of admitting his weakness. He sighed deeply and closed his eyes before speaking. I think my heart skipped a beat. I flinched at his mention of Kondo-san, which caused my body to jolt unexpectedly. Hijikata-san, however, was unfazed by his question. Okuta finally seemed to have eased down. It looked as if Kondo-san's well-being was the only thing keeping Okuta invested in his own health. But little did he know the truth about Kondo-san. The tone of their conversation sounded like one of their usual banter sessions, but this was different. Both of them wore expressions that gleamed with nostalgia. I could understand now why Soma may have felt inclined to step out. I began to gather that there was much for them to reminisce about, so I took the chance to sneak out. A cool breeze of night air brushed against my cheeks as I gazed towards stars twinkling in the clear sky. I can't continue anymore. I need a break. I need the break. I need the break, and I need to go eat dinner. Because it's time for me to eat dinner. I eat dinner on a fucking schedule, apparently. I am a cat. We're done for today. We're done for today because we have a lot going on after this. At 8 p.m. EST, we're going to be playing Splatoon 3 because it's Splatfest. We're on Team Courage, so we're going to be that, and I am limited to using one of the bows because there was challenges in place, and I'm going to do them. I'm going to be playing what I call the mini bow, which is the reef ducks, I think. And then after 2 hours, we're going to be doing art stream, where I'm going to be working on Ties the Fates, where I'm currently doing full art for all of my characters. So if you're interested in that, there you go. If you just want to wait for it, I don't know. Yeah, you guys can pick what you want to do. Anyway, that is it for today. I didn't expect for the pain to continue. But here we are. I'll see you tomorrow. Which is at, hopefully, 3 EST. Where we continue Hijikato's route. Goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.